Welcome to Friend of a Friend from Creative Pinellas, a new conversation series drawing connections between artists, inspirations, friends, and mentors, and showcasing the individuals that together make a creative community.
This program is brought to you by Creative Pinellas. Our mission is to facilitate a vibrant, integrative, collaborative, and sustainable Pinellas County arts community and arts and cultural destination. Creative Pinellas is funded in part by the Pinellas County Board of County Commissioners, Visit St. Pete Clearwater, and the State of Florida Department of State Division of Cultural Affairs.
Today's conversation features artists Babs Reingold and Jason Hackenwerth.
I would like to welcome everyone to this month's episode of Friend of a Friend. And we're excited to have our guests with us, Babs Reingold and Jason Hackenwerth. If this is your first time joining us for this show, it's a lot of fun. Just like we mentioned in the intro, Friend of a Friend is a chance to get to know some artists and also to understand the community that we all exist within. So the basic premise of the show is that this month's guest will be next month's host, and then they get to choose a guest that they would like. Usually this is a Pinellas County artist that is a friend, a mentor, an inspiration. But it's exciting because not only do we get to know artists better, but we get to see how, though we're actually one large creative community, we're actually a really tight-knit community. So it's really been a lot of fun. And like we mentioned, this month, our host will be Babs Reingold, and her guest is artist Jason Hackenwerth. And at this point, I would like to hand it over to Babs as she'll go ahead and begin our show for us. I'll see you guys at the end.
Thank you, Danny.
Were you gonna? Hi, Danny. Thank you, Danny. Before I get started, I want to thank you again for hosting this series. I think it's a fantastic series, and I'm very excited about it. And I'm very excited as well to welcome Jason Hackenwerth today. Jason received his MFA in painting from the Savannah College of Art and Design and his BFA in printmaking from Webster University. And while I'm doing this intro, Danny is going to play some of Jason's work. So the slides will rotate, hopefully, as I'm introducing him. He's shown his work all across the globe and in such venues as the Guggenheim Museum, New York, the National Museum, Scotland, the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, and the Weissman Art Museum in Minneapolis. His work has been reviewed in Art in America, Sculpture Magazine, the New York Times, London Metro, and many more. He's received grants from the Pollock Krasner Foundation in 2011, and he received a Creative Pinellas Professional Artist Grant as well. He's currently a professor of art and printmaking at Eckerd College. And I am not sure, is my sound still going? I'm going, right?
I can hear you.
Okay, good. All right. Since 2005, Jason has explored the phenomenon of temporality and joy through the transformation of ordinary materials. Currently, his public installations take the form of large-scale sculptural installations created from biodegradable natural latex balloons. Inspired by mythology, the human experience, and the ephemeral nature of his chosen medium, each work is at once mysterious, accessible, and fun, complementing and responding to its architectural setting. Hackenworth developed techniques to connect thousands of balloons into rigid, complex forms that, when suspended, seem to defy gravity and highlight the material's qualities of translucency, movement, and illumination. Audiences around the world have connected with their own inner joy through their experience of Hackenworth's delightful organic forms. And because I'm an environmental or an artist that works on pieces that deal with the environment, I wanted to share a note that Jason shared with me about the latex balloons. It is a common misconception that latex balloons are made from plastic. In fact, latex balloons are made from 100% natural rubber latex, which is collected from the Hevia. You correct me. Brasiliensis para rubber trees that are from sustainable rainforest plantations.
There you go.
Latex balloons are also 100% biodegradable. They decompose at about the same rate as an oak leaf, and recent biodegradability tests have confirmed that natural rubber balloons biodegrade to approximately 90% within 2 years. He only uses natural latex balloons to build his magnificent aerial and wearable that works on pieces. The artist never releases balloons into the environment. Okay, so that's my introduction to Jason. Did I get anything wrong, Jason? Do you want to correct me on anything? No?
Sounds
Okay.
great.
Okay, so to start us off tonight, I wanted to talk a little bit about how Jason and I met, which is interesting. I was living in Tybee Island from 2000 to middle of 2004. We were living in Tybee Island. And Jason was attending the Savannah College of Art and Design then, and he was in his MFA show. And we had met, I think at a couple of openings. We have a mutual friend down there that I've stayed close in touch with, Marcus Kenny, who had started this gallery. And so Jason was showing his work. And at that time, Jim and I were still, we would try to purchase art. I mean, for years we tried to purchase art. Lately, it's not so easy to do because we don't have a lot of extra funds. But I was particularly drawn to Jason's work, and he has some of that early work sitting behind him. And I wanted to ask him a little bit about those particular shapes, because it was one of the things that drew me to his work. And he has, even though he has gone, to all these different mediums, and he has switched from painting to making sculpture, and he's had his start in 2D, he's switched over to 3D, much like myself. I see these forms as this repetitive, they keep coming back. I have some of the same stuff happen to me, and I wanted him to talk a little bit about that. And then I just want to mention an artist that also made me think of him. His name is Byron Kim. And Danny, he's, numbers, I need to give you numbers. I just wanted to show these balloon things quick, and then I'm going to let Jason start talking, because you don't want to hear me, you want to hear him. Are these at the end? I think these are at the end. They are. Could you stick up slide number 37 and slide number 38 real quick? Maybe not so quick. Meanwhile, Jason, why don't you go ahead and start answering my thought about your shapes in your work and where that comes from and how long you've been doing that or using that shape, and what's the significance of it?
Well, sure, Babs. Thank you, and thanks for choosing me to be your friend of a friend. I really appreciate that, and I'm honored to be on here, and I'm thrilled to be part of the Friend of a Friend series with Creative Pinellas and all of the amazing things that Creative Pinellas have been doing for the community. So thanks to all of you, and thanks for showing us these Byron Kim pieces. They really do hit you right in the gut.
Now,
sorry, I can't help it.
Were you familiar with his work?
No,
before?
I've never seen this before, ever. Never seen this work, but
Okay.
it is interesting. And you asked me about that shape and how long I've been doing it, and I've been doing it forever. I mean, as long as I've been making drawings, I've been doing it. I remember my third grade art teacher telling me that you cannot make mistakes, you just make changes. And so I've always been drawing. It's always been my go-to thing to do. When other kids were out playing sports or whatever, I was drawing, and it was always just this shape that would start as an arc of my wrist, and it would just develop into some form. And so that curve over the years has become apparent to me as a sort of universal curve that we share with every object in nature. All things seem to come from this universal sort of curve and volume, and I've always been fascinated with it. And it manifests in my work over and over, as you mentioned. And so these pieces that are behind me are some works from 2001, and so it was nice to pull them out of storage and put them up. I haven't seen these since probably since then, for a very long time. And they're just small encaustic paintings. They're made of wax that's colored with Crayola crayons, and there are notes that are written underneath. And so underneath here it says, there was a love note that said, "Do you love me? Yes, no." And you can see through some of them and partly read some of the messages, but the form itself is a portion of the number 6 or the number 9. And the idea was that these were interchangeable, so that you could take one from here and spin it around and put it there. The title of the series is the Old Navy Action Series, because I chose these colors based on the idea of every spring fashion companies and designers come out with their new colors. And I thought that these were so fun like that. It was sort of this playful title, the Old Navy Action Series, an action series because they move around. But yeah. I've never felt confident or safe enough to let anyone show them or put them out because they're so delicate. I'm afraid to touch them myself, and so I keep them very carefully wrapped and stored.
What are they?
So
tell me again. So tell me again. What is the medium? It's melted crayon. Did you say?
Beeswax. It's beeswax with crayons melted in there. Yeah. And in most cases, I don't consider my work that precious. I really don't. I very rarely consider anything, objects, precious. But this particular piece feels to me seminal, and I've held on to it for all these years. And I keep very little of my own work. And if it doesn't go out the door naturally on its own, generally a year later it's in the dumpster. I don't keep things. Okay. But this one I've held on to, and so I know that you have a piece from this time that's similar to this, and so I kept these.
It's not quite. It's not the color. It's not the color though.
No, it's not.
It's when you switched. Yeah. Which is my.
Well, I play around with a lot of different colors. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. It's interesting.
So that form is still happening. If you look around my studio, that form is here, and it's here moving around.
Well, since you're doing that, since you're doing that, why don't you go ahead? I was going to ask you that at the end, but why don't you go ahead and since you showed that real quick, we'll talk. We'll go off script, and we'll talk a little bit about this new work. Even though you don't have any slides of this new work, so it's fine. You can swing around again and show us. This is your commission. So tell us about your commission a little bit.
Well, right. So I've been since 2004. I started making those installations and huge sculptures with latex balloons, and they've grown and grown, and they took me around the world many times, all over, making these things. But of course they're temporary, and they've opened the door to a lot of really wonderful places for me to have an opportunity to show my work. But with that, there's no longevity. And so I've always been looking for a way to make work that feels as surprising, but that won't deflate. So I started using bent steel and bent wire and making forms with it a long time ago. And I was covering them with what you would make plaster casts with, plaster cloth. And those were really special pieces But I knew that the airport, the Tampa airport, had a call coming up, and I had originally applied for it, but the work that I proposed, I didn't have a real track record for making, so they passed the first time when they first began, and then a couple of years later they came back with another call, and I knew that was going to come, so I started working diligently, making progress on these more permanent forms. So when the call did come, I had made work that I could show them, that they felt confident that I could create a large mobile that could hang in the Tampa airport when they were finished with the expansion. So I feel extremely lucky.
I saw that piece, right? I saw the one that you used. You had it up.
Yeah, you came and checked it out at Eckerd. Yeah, so to photograph that piece, I hung it in the gallery at Eckerd, what a beautiful space they have there. So I hung the piece there to photograph it, and then you and Jim came, and you got to see that piece. Now, those were really just test sculptures, but they worked very well, and won the confidence of the committee there at the Tampa airport. And so now I'm working on that commission, and what you saw, and I'll show you again, I'll be filling up a space that's 40 feet long, and these pieces are relatively small because the space is only 4 or 5 feet deep. Otherwise they'll bonk into the windows. So they have to be small. And right now I'm really only just working on the forms themselves, and there will be a number of different types of forms. And then there will be countless lavish embellishments, tentacles, antenna, little bubbles and things that go on them, just like the latex balloon work that I do. So I'm having to invent the process and all of the little accoutrements that go on them as well, which has been fun and challenging and very time consuming. There's an immediacy with the latex balloon work.
Well, you know what's interesting to me about what you do, there's a relationship between the two of us. Experiment a lot. You go to these materials, and then you have to discover how to work with the materials and make the materials do what you want it to do. And I see that you decided to use the fiberglass, which I long ago was using fiberglass, and the translucency of fiberglass and the light. You're playing with the light. You're playing with the light in the balloons. And I was interested in that, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that too. Like, if you could tell us, so we're going to now go back to the shift. One of the things that you and I just recently had a conversation about, that's fascinating to me as an artist, is that artists tend to make these shifts, and sometimes the something demands it. Like, you get this commission, and now you got to like make it happen. And so, you've been looking for a way to do permanent work, but you were doing, you were doing these balloon pieces, which are not going to work. But how did you shift? Can you talk a little bit about that, sort of what that time period was in New York? I think people might be fascinated a little bit about that as well. When you get to New York, there's this thing that happens to you as an artist, and there's all this stuff going on, and you've gotten out of grad school, and you start to get bombarded with all the things that are going on there. And there's influences that happened. Why I showed you those Byron Kim bellies, those belly pieces, that I just was so taken by them. And I thought, wow, he made them out of encaustic. And I was trying to figure out how he did that. And then I started experimenting with encaustic. And then I had a studio in Hoboken with a studio mate who was working in encaustic. So talk a little bit about how you shifted and into the balloon work.
I too was working with encaustic, like you see behind me.
Yeah.
But I was working in lots of different galleries. I mean, in New York, I got there right after grad school, and like you said, it either makes you or it makes you leave. And I didn't want to leave. Yeah. So I learned how to hustle, which, is it takes a lot. So I was working at a gallery through inroads that I had made during a residency I had done. I received a residency while I was at SCAD, and I made some inroads while I was in New York City doing my final semester. But when I moved to New York City, I had to work through the week. And then at night and on weekends, I would take the subway to my studio. So I was paying a fortune for a studio and another fortune for an apartment. And I would ride the subway for an hour to Dumbo each night and an hour back early in the morning to get, a few hours of sleep and then go to work. And it was like a zombie walk. Everybody seemed so miserable. And so everybody's just going to work all the time, going to work so they can just keep up with the rent. And it seemed useless. And I felt like everybody needed something to make them happy, kind of like what we need right now, really. And, so I wanted to reach people. I wanted people to feel some joy. And I've always wanted to. I remember in undergrad, I wanted to put paintings on billboards to reach them. And my painting instructor, I remember he said, Jason, no, most people don't care about art. And nobody's going to look at a billboard because it has a painting on it. And I thought, this guy's an artist? What? But maybe he's right. I don't know. But I felt like people would get some joy. So I took balloons because my mom
what
always
got
said
you to a balloon? What?
I had some. My mom always said that balloons were magic. Balloons are magic. So I took some balloons to the subway at, I don't know. I was terrified. I took a black plastic trash bag and I started blowing up balloons at, I don't know. It took me all night to get the courage. And finally at 2 a.m. I started blowing them up, and I blew up 100 little balloons. And then I took them in the subway all the way to my studio to the stop at York Street in Dumbo, and a can of spray adhesive. And there I was. And the ceilings there are very low and grimy.
I know that stop.
Dripping stuff. Yeah. And so I started sticking those things right on the ceiling where all this sort of slime and grime and they were this color. They were this lime green. And I thought, it's like this toxic slime that all the movies show. And I put that there as this sort of surrealist joke. And by 5 a.m. I had put up 100 of these things, and in an area like a patch. And then people started showing up, and they were stopping to look at them and take pictures. And I was kind of hiding off in the distance by then, not sure what would happen. And when I see people in New York City on their way to work with no time to spare, stopping to look at it, smiling, taking pictures, I figured, okay, maybe there is something to this. And so I kept it up, and I had a friend who suggested that I try that, and I thought that's nuts, but it worked. And then the more I did it, the more ideas came, and then I was invited to do something like that for the Scope Art Show in London, and I found myself in London with a bunch of balloons, and I spent hours and hours, days putting all this stuff together.
But these were not the
balloons
sculptures
stuck all over the walls.
Just the balloons.
Just balloons stuck on the walls. But then when I had finished the installation, or I got it to a point, I took a nap because I was exhausted. When I came back down, the fair is about to start, Saatchi's coming, and they had torn it all off the walls. And they told me that I owed them 5,000 pounds because the walls were damaged. And I had been given permission, but a new manager had come on and said, get rid of this stuff. And oh my gosh, I was a mess.
Oh my God.
I was crying, I was drunk. I was a mess. I was just a mess.
That's brutal.
Then the idea came to make a sculpture that couldn't be, if they don't like where it is, I can move it.
Let's show.
I have that sculpture. I think it might be slide 23. I think it's number 23.
Okay.
And
is that the first?
I think it's either 23 or it's 24. It's an orange sort of box.
Okay.
Was in my mind, that was all I knew how to do. I could make this. There it is. So I just, I was crying in the bathtub and I was praying and I was freaking out and I was done. I was at the bottom. I had nowhere to go, and I was just late on my rent by 3 months. I'd already been issued an eviction notice if I didn't pay the rent, and so I was really at
Oh
the
my
end of my
God.
rope. I was done, and so New York was
You-
just about to have ended me. But instead of giving up, I had this idea, and I ran down and I made this thing. And and at that time, for me, I was a painter, and these
Yeah.
kinds of things were really in response to paintings. And so I think that there's a Peter Haley painting that this is in response to. Not Peter. Is it Peter Haley?
That's 22, slide 22.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
and so, yeah. So I don't know if anybody feels any kind of a correlation with these, but the work that I was making was, in my mind, an extension of painting, and the colors were informed by painting, and oftentimes they were inspired by famous paintings or painters that I loved. If we go 2 slides forward or 1 slide forward, I think there's one called "We Two Boys Together Clinging" that is a response to David Hockney. I'm sorry, I can't remember the number of it. I've got it here.
Well, there's is that the painting number 20?
There's a painting. We Two
They're
Boys
clinging,
Together.
20, slide 20.
Yeah, so that's the
Is that
David
it?
Hockney painting, and then just either before or after it is my response to that painting that I love. By the way, I love this painting, and so then I made this in response to that painting, and I titled this piece "We Two Boys Together Clinging," and I'm sure nobody else would see that really, but for me this was
Well,
this was a way to
where was
respond
this?
to it. So I got back from London when I had, discovered I could make these sculptures, and FAO Schwartz had a call out to artists and weirdos and whomever else because they were opening their new flagship store, and so I sent them the images of that orange sculpture I just showed you, and another freaky one that I made the next night without having slept. And I was so excited and on such a wave of discovery. I just couldn't be kept down. I immediately contacted FAO Schwartz and said, "Hey, listen, you need to hire me to come and do this at your store." And they said yes. And they did.
Wow.
They gave me a contract. They built that platform right in the middle of the new flagship store right on Broadway, and they paid
Nice.
me at what seemed like a fortune at the time to be there every day for 8 hours a day to just make anything, whatever I wanted. I just invented stuff, and they would pay for the balloons, and I would order the balloons and they would pay the invoice, and then I would ride the bus, and in the morning I would just grab, I'm going to take blue and yellow and red and white, and that's it. And then I would go and I would just make stuff. And I didn't necessarily have a plan, just some ideas, and I would make some sketches, but they didn't hold my feet to the fire. I could do anything I wanted, and that became my studio. And I worked on that platform, and it was about an 8-foot diameter platform, so pretty small. I was on
Well, that's still
display
pretty
a
big.
lot. It was very awkward, but people always ask the same questions. What are you making? Or all this stuff. But it was very formative.
Now, there's no Jason, there's no form that a wire form or anything that's holding this together,
No.
correct?
No, there's not. And
Can you
Danny,
talk a little bit
maybe you
about
had
that?
slide number 23. Remember we were talking about the structure one. Was it number 23? No, I'm sorry. It was the blue one with the visor. But yeah, there we go.
That's
So, yeah.
24.
So
That's 24.
yeah, so there's no armature, nothing. So over the years, I have been working out ways of engineering these things together so it's just balloons. And look at this piece. Now that is, and the one that you saw at the National Museum Scotland, there's no armature there. That is 500 pounds of balloons all put together in such an architecturally engineered way that not only is all of the weight supported, but the structure remains rigid and tense enough that it holds
Which
up.
one is that?
over
What slide?
time.
Show
Well,
that
was there
slide.
that was up for like 3 months, that piece right there.
Here?
That
And
slide would
where-
have been 4 and 5, I think.
4, yeah, 4 and 5. That is, tell us how big that is, because it looks enormous. This one.
It was enormous. Yeah, this thing's enormous. It was, I don't know, 56 feet high, and
Wow.
yeah, and
And that thing is, I saw there's a picture of you in number 5 where you're working on it.
yeah,
Show that picture.
That's
What
actually a
is
guy
it?
named Brian who helps me. That's Brian. But in any case, yeah, same
Oh.
size. You see the scale of it. So yes,
Yeah.
it was the size of a cathedral. No kidding. I mean, I shit you not. It is gigantic, and more than 44,000 balloons went in that. But in the
Wow.
doing, this thing got millions of views in British press and so on, and the videos that the National Museum put up, and lots and lots and lots of people complained about all of the plastic waste, and that was really when I started getting a lot of this blowback. Is that a pun? I don't know. In any case, I started getting a lot of complaints about the waste and about the plastic, and I had to start adding this tagline that these are not plastic, and this is not necessarily creating waste. Now, these trees are leaking this sap no matter what, whether we cultivate it and do something wonderful with it or not. They are giving. That's it.
Right.
These are the giving trees, and they don't stop giving. And the tires on your car are made from the same trees. And it's and so, yeah, this stuff turns to dust. It really breaks my heart when the world is breaking up with balloons, because these aren't the problem. Now, when people put helium in a balloon and then they let it go in the sky, that's not okay. We don't do that. But I don't do that, but still the whole world.
You just put air, right?
Yeah.
You
So
just
I
put
think
air.
that's just selective outrage, but the reality is the balloons aren't the problem. It's behavior that's the problem. And what are you going to do?
Right,
So-
right. Well, let's take a look though. I want to show also the one that you showed in the Guggenheim, because that's so up high, and the Guggenheim is that's 1 and 2, slides 1 and 2, Danny. That is so, that atrium in the Guggenheim, if people who are watching have never been there, that is something. When you have an installation in there, it's so powerful, being on, going up on those, spiraling up on the floors and being able to look down into the atrium, that it's just amazing. And I wanted to talk a little bit because it has that skylight that's up there and the light. So could you talk a little bit about this project and then how you came to do this project?
Yeah,
And
look at
also,
those people. Look how little that thing was.
I
Gigantic.
know.
It was enormous.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was installing a sculpture on the roof of a building in Atlanta, and it wasn't going well. The sun was beating down, and stuff was failing, and I was having a rough day. And I came inside to just take a breath of air and realign, get centered and go, figure out how to resolve the situation. And the phone rang, and it was the Guggenheim. And I was in my mind, I'm elated. They want to have this conversation about, can you put a sculpture in the rotunda of the Guggenheim? I'm like, are you kidding me? What? And I'm thinking about that conversation of the recording of Salvador Dali having with the Guggenheim when they were talking to him about having his show there. I was thinking, this is just unreal. I was just floating on air at the time, and they said, yeah, we want you to have this this sculpture hanging in it. We want it to be really big and amazing and so on, but it has to come through the front door, and you only have 30 minutes to install it. What? So I said, yeah, no problem. I can do that easy. Yeah. And then I set about figuring out how to do it. And there it is. I put in a sculpture that was 36 feet tall and as big around just absolutely enormous. And it was, I mean, it was a fireball. It stole the show.
How did you do that then? Come on, tell us, fess up.
I got skills, right?
Yeah, I'm telling you, holy
Yeah.
moly.
The
That's something.
Guggenheim has some of the most serious installers. They don't joke around.
Yeah.
And I joke around a little. And so I was talking about how we're going to do this and how it's going to happen. And they're, and it took months of convincing them that I could do it. And then like, well, okay, all right. And I gave them the instructions. I had more than 30 people come to help because we had to have all these hands, because basically we had to assemble this piece on the floor. And, it was 1, 2, 3 pieces together,
right,
that had to be snaked through the front door from trucks that were idling out on, on the street. It was incredible. And we did it. And up until having gotten the thing in the air, all of the art handlers at the Guggenheim gave me side eye constantly. They're all like, yeah, whatever, dude. But when we got this thing up in 37 minutes, and I was out of my mind getting it done. It was incredible. It was just, the whole experience was so unreal. And it was nearly like an out of body event while I'm, dealing with 30 or more people, all putting this thing together and one thing after another. And we get it up, and there's still plastic on the floor from what we had to unwrap, or these tarps that I used to bring it in the door and so on. And then the art handlers, the installers, the team captain came down and he congratulated me, and then he wanted to shake my hand because he had been completely skeptical and pessimistic about it all along. And then when it was there up like this beacon, he changed his mind. Everybody changed their mind. And that was one of the greatest feelings ever. I was just crying. I was so excited.
Now because the light is coming in too, so obviously the piece changes as time goes on, though the Guggenheim is basically open during the day, but if it's a very cloudy day or a bright sunshine, the piece changes.
Well, if you look in the upper right hand corner behind the sculpture, you'll see a tiny little black triangular line.
Yeah.
So we installed multiple stands. They kind of look like those rolling coat racks that they have in the hallways of hotels at night. Yeah. They had these stands that there were so many lights. So there were 3 of those things just flooding it with light. So the photographer really had to do his job by, making sure that those weren't evident in every single photo. And you can see the lights in this picture. But in most of the photos, you don't notice those lights. And so there were a lot of things that had to be done to get this to work. You can't support from the railings. They will not support this weight, especially considering that the weight is pulling horizontally this way. So we had to build specific triangular kind of stands, or these tripod stands, that could then have a 30-degree angle of line that came down from 3 points to a single point. And you don't see those either. There were all kinds of little stuff that I had to come up with in order to make this work. And then thankfully, the Guggenheim's team built all that stuff and put it together for me. But that was all stuff that we just had to come up with on the fly and figure out how to make this thing work.
Well, so talk a little bit about the weight of it once it's what you're suspending there, because it looks like a lot. I mean, I don't know, balloons, you think, oh, they can't be that heavy, but latex can get heavy.
This one in particular probably weighed 26 pounds.
Really?
Yeah, this one was very lightweight. It doesn't have the density. The other one that you saw, in order to support all of that weight, I had to put a balloon inside of a balloon. So every single balloon that you saw in that piece is actually 2 balloons thick, which doubles the number of balloons used every single balloon. And then instead of just being an empty framework like this, basically like lattice, like those stretchy bags that a bag of oranges come in or whatever. This is sort of like that. But the one that you saw at the National Museum of Scotland, that is a big, thick double wall framework that's filled with even bigger, thicker balloons. And so it was the walls of that were, 2.5, 3 feet thick in order to be strong enough to support a 60-foot, 500-pound structure, and only rigged from the very top, and all the rest of the weight was supported just from the shape of that, basically, of that architecture.
Well, so I'm assuming then you can almost, like, this kind of piece could all be like fish line. You don't even have to have cable when they're that light.
Probably could. In New York City, you've got to have lots
Cables.
of cable and
Yeah.
redundancies, and there are codes, but yeah, probably could do. But I've certainly broken my share of fish line for sure. I don't bother with that anymore.
Yeah. Let's look at a few more of your slides. Why don't you talk a little bit also about the one that showed here at the Tampa Museum? And I also want to save a little time to talk about your painting. We're doing okay so far.
All right.
But,
well, yeah, the piece at the Tampa Museum, that was from the Skyway show, and so many amazing local artists in the Skyway. And anybody who's not familiar with the Skyway shows should do a little digging and read up on all of the different artists and how the show was put together over multiple museums. And I know that this year there's going to be another one with even more venues. Very exciting. And congratulations to all the local artists who will be in that. This was at the Tampa Museum of Art. I was lucky enough to be selected by the Tampa Museum to have the piece. And originally, they wanted to have the piece out on the balcony, looking out at the university across the water. And I don't think that they quite realized that the latex balloons couldn't live out there over time. So when we spoke about where it would have to go, they had nowhere left on the inside, especially for such a sizable piece, because they're trying to cram in as many artists as they can to showcase all of the talent in the area. And so they said, well, really the only place that we have left where we don't have anything scheduled to be is this corridor. And I said, well, let's look at the corridor. And when I did, and when you're in that corridor, it feels, sort of, what I like about it is it's this journey that you go through. And on one side, it's all open and you see this beautiful sort of atrium. And on the other side is this blank wall. But it was also sort of confining. And I like that it was like this chute. So like that, I decided, well, I'm sort of confined and constricted. I decided I would make something that was in response as a crucifixion. And so this piece was intended as a crucifixion. And I don't know if I frustrated the curators, but I think they were very surprised that the concept that I came to them with were this dark sort of colors and that it was sort of slit open and it was tied up and it had a hood over the end as if it were, some kind of a shroud. And so in my mind, and I wrote a didactic about the piece that described how it was a crucifixion, and the title of the piece was Passion. I'm sure that most of my work is misinterpreted or misunderstood in that way, and that's okay. It mostly comes across as very joyful, and it wasn't meant not to be, but I generally have some kind of an underlying concept that relates to my own spirituality in the work, and in the process of making it is also a part of honoring that. And so this piece was very much about this constriction tied up in this space.
Now this, the thing that I don't see the dark side, and even if people tell me about what they're thinking, and I have dark side in my work, but I also have humor. There's always humor somewhere lurking in there, because where would we be without humor? But talk a little bit about, so as the piece is, let's say it's now, this just show was 3 months.
Yeah.
So you're on the, and I remember seeing it later on as it's starting to wither. So this quality of your work is interesting too, where the piece is transforming and changing before your eyes. I mean, obviously not literally within minutes, but it feels like it becomes a different piece. And do you document any of that?
I have, and I used to keep them. I would, early on, I kept several of them for months and even years, and and eventually they, in a couple of years, even in an airtight container, they just turn to dust, and there's nothing left. But yeah, I've documented that, and I've even shown them in states where they're all just sort of a floppy blob, which is very interesting. Think about it like this. We're aging, Babs. I mean, you look great. I know I do too, but we look different than we did 10 and 20 years ago, but we don't see it every day. When we're looking at ourselves in the mirror, we just look how we look. But when we look at the photograph from 5 years ago, it's like, oh my gosh, what happened?
Yeah.
And time
Well,
does these pieces too. If you come and see this on opening night or in the beginning week, it's shiny and robust, and it's still, just fresh, like fresh flowers. But then a month later, it starts to get a little more dull, and it gets a little softer and more limp. And I think that process has taught me a great deal and has helped me to recognize my own ephemerality, my own temporary lifespan, and helped me realize that there's so much more to life that's important than anything. And I think that doing this work set me on a path of discovering my true self, and helped me wake up from the delusion of who I thought I was years ago. And that's part of what I mentioned, and why it's important to me that these works have this underlying concept that at least is there for anyone who is open to the idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you certainly, you get the ephemeral quality because the work itself feels light, and it feels like it could just, even though it's structured and it's there, it could also float away. And the Buddhist thing is that we're all dying. I mean, the moment you're born, you're dying. I mean, that's the cycle anyway. But before we start to run out a little bit of time, I wanted to get in some of your paintings, because you left painting for a while. And I think we talked about that briefly. Now I can't remember. We've had a number of conversations, and you were talking about how you just wanted these paintings to be also accessible to people. So you were not charging a lot of money for the paintings. You decided you wanted to do that. And in all of you have, if people don't follow you, they should follow you on Instagram, because you have this great feed that you do on Instagram where you're showing what you're doing in the studio. You have your weekly report of what's happening in there. In your newly built studio, which I have not gotten to see because of coronavirus.
Come on down. We'll put on a mask. Don't worry.
I think it's time. I think it's time now. So Danny, scroll through a few of these. They're start at 26 and go to just kind of scroll through some of them while we're talking about them. And Jason, stop them if you want to talk about one. But I wanted to talk about number 30 and number 32, because and there's a couple of others where that shape of yours, it just all of a sudden there it is again. It's I keep going and well, it's the balloon shapes. It's the same.
I think so. I think that maybe the balloon shapes are the same shape that I was making before I was making balloon shapes, and there's that shape again still. And so maybe here's evidence that shape is some unmanifested something that I've been chasing all along. And it just happened that when I use balloons, it looks that way. When I make paintings, it looks that way. And when I make these other forms, it looks that way. And I don't think I'm forcing that. It just keeps on gravitating back to it. And so when I started making these paintings again, it was a real dance. And Danny, if you want to scroll a little further, it's fine.
Go to 32.
I wanted to
Go to 32.
explore painting. I wanted to explore all this mark making and really bring glory to all of the artists, all the painters that I love and have always admired and never really had the courage to emulate. And so I started really working on these paintings and trying to be loose and expressive. But then as I began to develop and understand and appreciate the materials and medium, then I started reintroducing the form, but I didn't want it to be heavy-handed. I didn't want them to be so obvious. And like, for instance, on this one, I feel like they're very stuck. It's very obvious, and not in a really bad way, but I felt like, well, part of my practice, and if you tune in to my Instagram feed on my Saturday studio visits, I try not to hold anything back. Everything is okay to experiment and try, and then eventually, if the paintings aren't good, I'll just paint over them. No big deal. And then in doing that, I'm able to find my voice, and I was really getting close to discovering what I think were really my best paintings yet. And toward the end of this series of paintings that we have here,
keep going, Danny,
that I feel like really started to approach something that combines all of that visceral mark making that I'm so passionate about, but also still embodies that form, that volume that keeps reoccurring. And I think it's the very last painting that I offered here that in my mind is probably the best painting of all of the paintings that I've made. I think this one here, because it does have all of that. It has that form. It has that dovetail curve that I feel so passionate about. But then it also has this sort of kooky, loose, painterly quality that I could name, a dozen painters that I admire whose work, you'd find some of these kinds of details in, and that made me feel like I've really finally started stepping in my own shoes in this painting. And and I was getting glimpses of that leading up to this, but then I've had to put my paintings on hold to work on this this commission. And so I'm hoping that I don't lose my momentum from painting, but my studio just isn't big enough to do both. So right now I'm working on these forms, and then pretty soon I think I'll get right back to these paintings and keep on cranking.
Well, your studio visits are very brave of you, because you're showing everybody exactly how you're thinking. What?
How bad I am. I'll let them see how bad I am, because that's how we get better, right? I don't want anybody out there to think that they can't do it. I want people to feel encouraged that we all have to struggle. We have to make 10 terrible paintings before we even see a glimpse of goodness in our paintings. Yeah. And while I'm plugging, I might as well say a lot of those paintings are at Leslie Curran's gallery at Articles here in St. Pete. And if you're interested, you should definitely visit her.
Well, my husband, who is a writer, is always telling me, he said, it's ridiculous. These artists, they put up all their rough drafts. Writers only get, they get the published piece. Nobody sees the rough drafts. Yeah. And artists are always, and it does take a lot of pieces sometimes to get to the right piece, but also part of that is the whole process over years. As you work with, like any skill, it just comes. It comes because you're practicing. That's right. Sometimes they call it a practice. It's just like playing music. It's like playing sports. It's like anything that you do over and over, you get better at. Right. Well, we're like closing in on the, I think, bewitching hour here.
I think we've gone over. I think we're over. So
I just want to, okay, so two things I want to do. I wanted to just wrap up with saying that we're both going to be in this upcoming Creative Pinellas show, the annual show, which I understand now is going to go a little longer into December. So it's up from, I think it was November 12th to like almost a month or something, I think Danny said. So he can chime in and correct me afterward. And I also wanted to end with a few of my pictures just to show what I'm doing in case people didn't catch the first one of me. So these are, I'm working on these hairnest pieces, which are, they're 7 foot high. They're graphite drawings on panel that I prepare, and they have different mediums that I work with, and the branches are 3D, and they come out from the panel. And then a lot of you saw these already in the previous episode, but they're made out of all kinds of different, this is cast glass, so they're made out of all kinds of different materials, and it's cast lead crystal. And the pieces are titled for the hair loss of that year. So this is hair nest 15, and that's where the number comes from. It's hair loss of 2015. And then the next slide is hair nest 16, and that's a detail of 15. And then the last, you can go to that one, and then there's a detail of this one. And then the last one is the one I've started. I haven't, the panel is now finished. I'm getting ready to start the next one. And I always do a study, and then I frame and sell these little studies as well. And so this is the next one. And I've decided I'm going to do the hair loss from 1999. So that's why it's called Hair Nest 99. And these are always from trees that I see regularly. And that's what I'm up to these days, along with other things, but that's the main focus for me.
Cool stuff.
And I think, Danny, how did we do on time? I think we're good.
Yeah, very good. Very good. And you got pretty close with that, those Art Annual dates too. Just wanted to point that out. The Arts Annual, it opens November 12th, which is a Thursday. And, originally we were planning on having it open through December 6th, but we're looking to have it open through December 20th. And just like you mentioned,
more than
that you and Jason are going to be part of that. Last month's guest, Akiko, also will be part of that. And like 27 other artists. It's going to be huge. And not just in person, but we have some sort of online components too because of coronavirus. So really looking forward to that.
Okay. So am I supposed to ask Jason who he's interviewing next? Are you doing that, Danny? I don't see Jason on my screen.
Danny knows the answer.
Yeah, if I could just preface it by, in case anybody's just joining us now, the premise of the show, of course, is that this month's guest, Jason this month, is next month's host. And so now we get to hear who Jason will be hosting next month.
Would you like me to say?
Jason?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, it's been such an honor to be your guest, Babs. Thank you. And thank you, Danny, for the opportunity.
My pleasure.
Here. So I had a very difficult time choosing. There are so many talented artists that I'm aware of and that I'm inspired by here in Pinellas County and the surrounding area. So many. And a lot of you, I wish I could say all of your names because I think there's so many brilliant ones, but I narrowed it down to Allison Terrell, who's a local artist, and she's only lived in the area for about a year. And I think that there's a continuity in her work that will be very interesting to talk about. And she makes, there's a sort of intimacy and a very personal nature in the work that she makes. And I think that in the way that she does it, it's almost opposite of what I do. And I think that will be a lot of fun to have that conversation.
Oh, that's going to be great. Looking forward to that.
Yeah. And you can see her work, Allison Terrell Art, on Instagram, as of course Babs. We know you're on Instagram's Babs Reingold, and you can check me out at Hackenworth on Instagram.
Okay.
Woo! Thanks a lot, guys. Conversation was great. It was a lot of fun listening to you guys. I enjoy this show every single time. So I've just got just a couple quick announcements. In fact, just one major one before we end it for tonight. Our Emerging Artist Grant application is open right now, but it closes this Monday at 11:59 p.m. So Monday, September 21st at 11:59. If you haven't applied yet, please go check out creativepinellas.org. You'll find the guidelines and FAQ and a link to the application there, and get your application in. But that's really it for this evening. Again, I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight, and especially thank you, Babs and Jason. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you. Thank you. It was fun.
Right.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks for
Bye.
watching. For more information on all the programming and resources from Creative Pinellas, visit creativepinellas.org.